I knew it was over, the moment Preston didn't look me in the eye. That polished MBA print sat across from me like I was a line item on his quarterly budget report. The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and fresh ambition. The name's Alan Mitchell, by the way, 55 years old, and I'd just spent 33 years at SecureTech Dynamics building the very systems that made their government contracts worth a damn. Preston had picked the glass-walled conference room on purpose. Maximum visibility for my execution. Half the engineering floor could watch if they bothered looking up from their screens. Through the glass, I could see Marcus from network security pretending to study his monitor while obviously watching our meeting. Janet from systems integration had stopped typing entirely. Even the summer interns were stealing glances. In the Rangers, we called this kind of thing a public demonstration. "Alan," Preston said, not bothering with pleasantries, "let's discuss optimizing our human capital resources." Human capital resources. I'd spent 33 years building encryption systems that kept our nation's communications secure. Before that, 22 years in the Army learning what real leadership looked like. Started as an 18-year-old private, worked my way up to Master Sergeant in the Rangers. Did 3 tours in Afghanistan, came home at 40, and jumped straight into the private sector. And now this 29-year-old kid was optimizing me into unemployment with business school buzzwords. "You've done solid work," Preston continued, flipping through my performance folder like it was a takeout menu. His Wharton MBA pin caught the fluorescent light. "But the industry is evolving rapidly. We need people who understand agile methodologies, cloud-native architectures, AI-enhanced security protocols." That old familiar calm settled over me. Same feeling I used to get before a mission. In the Rangers, they taught us to assess threats methodically. Preston Wallace was definitely a threat, just not the kind I was trained to handle. Preston had joined SecureTech 8 months ago after his previous startup crashed and burned. Some blockchain social media platform that burned through $12 million in venture capital before folding. But failure in Silicon Valley apparently qualified you to run a defense contractor these days. His LinkedIn showed 47,000 followers who hung on his every post about disrupting legacy industries and digital transformation. "Our investors are excited about our next-generation platform," he went on, leaning back like he owned the world. "Clean slate design, quantum-ready algorithms, machine learning integration, innovation that wins contracts today." I let him talk. Rule number 1 from my Army days: never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Preston was explaining exactly how little he understood about the systems he was inheriting. The same systems that had kept SecureTech's Pentagon contracts flowing for over a decade. "What I'm saying, Alan, is your skill set doesn't align with our strategic vision. We need digital natives, people who think in microservices. Your expertise in legacy encryption, well, that's not where cybersecurity is heading." The irony was perfect. Preston was explaining why my work was obsolete while sitting in a building protected by systems I'd designed. Every email he sent, every file he accessed, every login credential, all secured by protocols I'd written before he'd graduated college. Behind Preston, through the conference room glass, I watched my colleagues trying to look busy while clearly eavesdropping. Tom Rodriguez from my old project team kept glancing over. Sarah Martinez from compliance had her phone out, probably texting the news to other departments. The whole floor would know within 20 minutes. "I want to be fair," Preston continued, his voice taking on that fake sincerity they teach in business school. "You've shown tremendous loyalty to SecureTech, so we're offering a generous severance package. 8 months salary, extended benefits, positive references. Generous. 8 months for 33 years. I'd been there longer than Preston had been alive when he started kindergarten. "This transition needs to happen quickly. Clean breaks benefit everyone. We need you to clear your workspace today and transfer responsibilities to the team." I watched Preston's mouth keep moving, but my mind drifted back to 1991. First day at SecureTech, fresh out of the Army. The company was 15 people in a converted warehouse in Reston, mostly ex-military guys who'd worked classified projects. Back when defense contractors were scrappy operations run by people who understood the mission. We believed we were building something that mattered for national security. I remembered the early days when funding was tight and nobody knew if we'd make payroll. The all-nighters debugging critical systems. The pride when we landed our first major Pentagon contract. watching the company grow from that warehouse to a $3.2 billion operation with facilities across Northern Virginia. I remembered 2012, during the big reorganization when half the company got laid off and venture capitalists started circling like vultures. That's when I'd filed the provisional patents. Just covering my bases, my buddy Tony Walsh had advised. Smart insurance policy for uncertain times. Alan, Preston's voice cut through my memories. I need acknowledgement that you understand the terms. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Designer glasses that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Perfect teeth courtesy of expensive orthodontics. Wharton MBA pin positioned like a military decoration he'd never earned. This kid had never built anything in his life, never stayed up 72 hours straight fixing a critical system failure that could compromise national security. I understand, I said quietly. Excellent. Preston smiled and slid a tablet across the table. Just need your signature on the separation agreement. The tablet showed standard termination paperwork, legal language about confidentiality and non-compete clauses. I skimmed through it, noting the usual corporate language about intellectual property assignment and company ownership of work products. Standard stuff that HR probably used for every termination. Except for one thing they'd missed, something buried in agreements from 12 years ago. Preston, I said, stylus hovering over the signature line. Quick question about IP ownership. This assigns all work products to Secure Tech, but what about innovations created before formal assignment agreements were finalized? He blinked. I'm sorry? Patents filed under individual names during provisional periods, before final company assignment paperwork gets processed. What are you referring to? Of course he didn't know. Preston had been in middle school when I'd filed those papers. The 2012 reorganization had been chaos. Layoffs, funding crises, legal departments scrambling to keep the company solvent. A lot of paperwork fell through the cracks. Nothing important, I said, signing the tablet. Just curious about legal edge cases. Preston relaxed. Right, well, our legal team handles technical documentation. Everything's properly filed. I handed the tablet back. I'm sure it is. Outstanding. Preston stood up, extending his hand. Alan, I want you to know this isn't personal. Market forces demand innovation. And sometimes that means difficult decisions about resource allocation. Resource allocation, not people. Resources. I shook his hand. 22 years of military bearing dies hard. No hard feelings, Preston. You're doing what you think is best for the company. Exactly. He seemed relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. I appreciate your professionalism. I stood up, tucked the termination folder under my arm, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, I turned back. Preston, can I give you one piece of advice? From one professional to another? He nodded, already reaching for his phone. In the military, we have a saying, don't call in artillery until you know where your ammo depot is located. He looked confused. I'm sorry, what does that mean? You'll figure it out, I said, and walked out. The engineering floor had gone quiet. Not obviously quiet. Keyboards were still clicking, phones still ringing, but that underlying hum of conversation had stopped. Everyone knew what had just happened in the fishbowl. Tom Rodriguez caught my eye and gave a slight nod. We'd worked together for 15 years, debugged more systems than I could count. Sarah Martinez looked like she wanted to say something but didn't know what. Marcus from network security just stared at his screen, probably wondering if he was next. I walked past cubicles I'd helped design, servers I'd configured, whiteboards covered with architecture diagrams I'd drawn. 33 years of institutional knowledge walking toward the exit. My badge would stop working in 2 hours. My email access would be revoked by close of business. Standard protocol for terminated employees. My desk looked smaller than I remembered. The usual debris of a long career. Technical manuals, family photos, army commendations in cheap frames. Alex's police academy graduation photo sat front and center. My son, 30 years old, everything I'd hoped he'd become when I came home from my last deployment. Behind it, a smaller frame with my old Ranger unit from Afghanistan. Those were good years. Clear mission, solid leadership, people who understood that experience counted for something. Next to Alex's photo was a picture I treasured. My granddaughters, Madison and Harper. 7 and 5 years old, full of energy and questions about everything. Alex had been raising them mostly on his own since his divorce 2 years ago. Good kid, that boy. Better father than I'd been at his age. I opened desk drawers methodically. Personal items in the box, company property stayed behind. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of system documentation, my fingers found something I'd forgotten was there. A business card. Faded, corners bent. Sarah Walsh, intellectual property attorney. Tony's sister. I'd kept it all these years without really thinking about why. Maybe I'd known this day would come. As I packed, Tom Rodriguez wandered over. "This is bullshit, Alan. You built half the systems that keep this place running." "Company's changing," I said, taping up the box. "Preston's got his vision. Preston's got his head up his ass. You know how many Pentagon officials still ask for you specifically when there's a technical briefing?" I did know. But Pentagon officials didn't make hiring decisions at SecureTech anymore. Venture capitalists and MBA consultants did. "Take care of yourself, Tom. Watch your back." He understood. Preston wouldn't stop with me. Anyone over 45 with legacy thinking would be on the chopping block eventually. I didn't go home right away. I went to Murphy's Diner down the street, got myself black coffee and a moment to think. You know Murphy's. Red vinyl booths, waitresses who've been there since the Clinton administration, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat there and just breathed. Not raging, not planning anything dramatic, just thinking. SecureTech had been my whole adult life after the Army. I joined when we were still operating out of a converted warehouse in Reston, back when defense contractors were scrappy operations run by ex-military guys who understood the mission. The founders were Vietnam vets who'd worked on classified projects at NSA and wanted to build something meaningful in the private sector. I'd watched us grow from that warehouse to a $3.2 billion operation with facilities across Northern Virginia, seen us win our first major Pentagon contract, expand into CIA work, become a trusted name in government cybersecurity, and all of it, the infrastructure, the architecture, the core encryption protocols, had my fingerprints in the foundation. I didn't document everything the way some fresh college kid might. I lived that code. It wasn't in a manual somewhere. It was in my head, built over years of impossible deadlines and national security requirements. The kind of institutional knowledge that takes decades to accumulate and 5 minutes to walk out the door. The waitress, Helen, refilled my coffee without being asked. She'd been working Murphy's for 20 years, had watched dozens of defense contractors come and go from the office buildings nearby. "Rough day?" she asked. "Career change," I said. She nodded. Helen had seen plenty of those. Northern Virginia was full of middle-aged engineers getting right-sized out of companies they'd helped build. I paid Murphy in cash, walked 2 blocks in the wrong direction just to clear my head. Then I caught a cab home. The driver was a Pakistani immigrant, probably my age, working nights to support his family. We didn't talk much, but I gave him a good tip. Home smelled like old leather and Commander's dog food. My German Shepherd looked up from his bed, tail wagging but cautious. Dogs know when something fundamental has shifted in their world. Commander was 6 years old, had been with me since Sarah died. Best roommate I'd ever had, loyal, didn't complain, and never judged my bourbon consumption. I set the termination folder on my kitchen table, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff, not the daily drinker, and called Alex. "Dad?" He picked up on the second ring. "Everything okay?" "You never call on Monday nights. I got fired today." Long pause. "What? After 33 years? Dad, that's insane. New management. They want digital natives, cloud architects, people who think in microservices. That's age discrimination. That's corporate America." Alex was quiet for a moment. I could hear the TV in the background, probably cartoons for the girls. "You want me to come over?" "I can get a sitter." "No, stay with Madison and Harper. I'm fine. You sure?" "This is huge, Dad." "I'm sure. Give the girls a hug from Grandpa." After I hung up, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Buried beneath tax returns and expired warranties was a slim manila envelope. No label, just the weight of foresight and old habits. Inside was the original provisional patent application. My name at the top, not SecureTech's. Mine. Filed in August 2012 during one of the company's chaotic reorganizations, when legal was more focused on staying solvent than minding the intellectual property register. I'd been advised by someone much smarter than me, Tony Walsh, my old Army buddy turned IP attorney, to hold the provisional rights until things settled. Alan, he'd said over beers at an Arlington dive bar, file it under your name. You can always assign it later once the company's stable and they remember to cut you in properly. They never got stable. They just got profitable. And they sure as hell never remembered SecureTech had been licensing my core encryption framework the entire time. Lawyers had drafted agreements, temporary ones with expiration clauses and one very specific condition buried in the legal text like a landmine with a 12-year fuse. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, reversion of rights shall trigger automatically within 96 business hours of formal notice. Signed, stamped, filed with the USPTO, and nobody at SecureTech ever followed up because nobody thought I would ever leave. I was the foundation guy, the reliable old soldier, the one who kept the lights on while executives played musical chairs. Guess what, Preston? You just pulled the pin. The funny thing about working in defense for 33 years is you learn to think strategically. You don't react emotionally. You assess the situation, identify your assets, and execute with precision. Right now, sitting in my kitchen with Commander at my feet and bourbon warming my throat, I was doing exactly that. 96 business hours. That meant 12 working days from Monday's termination. 2.5 weeks for the automatic reversion to trigger. No action required on my part. The contract clause would activate itself like a time-delayed explosive. I did the math in my head. Termination was Monday at 4:15 p.m. 96 business hours would expire Friday of the third week. That gave SecureTech until then to figure out what they'd done. If they were smart, they'd discover the problem and try to renegotiate before the deadline. But Preston wasn't smart. He was confident, which in business is often worse than stupid. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Text messages from coworkers trying to figure out what happened. Sorry to hear the news, Alan. Please stay in touch. The kind of messages people send when they're scared they might be next. Tom Rodriguez sent a longer message. Heard what happened. This is total bullshit. Preston's cleaning house, targeting anyone over 40. Watch the news. He's probably announcing your replacement tomorrow. HR had sent an exit survey link, like I was going to rate my execution experience out of 5 stars. I didn't answer any of them. Let them wonder. They'd all stood there and watched it happen like a corporate funeral where nobody brings flowers. Not one person had spoken up when Preston handed me that folder. But here's what they didn't know, what Preston and his MBA brain trust couldn't possibly understand. I wasn't just another employee walking out the door. I was the architect walking away from a building he still owned the blueprints to, and those blueprints were about to become very, very expensive. The next 2 weeks crawled by like a training exercise. I kept to my routine: morning coffee, walk Commander around the neighborhood, read the news, call Alex to check on the girls. Normal retired guy stuff, except I wasn't retired. I was unemployed at 55, which in tech years made me ancient. Alex came by the first weekend with Madison and Harper. The girls were full of questions about why Grandpa was home during the day now. Kids have a way of cutting straight to what matters. "Are you sad, Grandpa?" Madison asked, climbing onto my lap while we watched cartoons. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups change jobs." "Will you get a new job?" "Maybe. We'll see." Harper, the 5-year-old philosopher, looked up from her coloring book. "If they were mean to you, you should tell on them." Out of the mouths of babes. Alex and I talked on the back deck while the girls played with Commander in the yard. My son had gotten his mother's empathy gene, always checking on people, making sure everyone was okay. "You seem pretty calm about all this," he said. "I'm 55, not 25. I've got savings, no mortgage, decent health. I'll figure something out." Still, 33 years. That's got to hurt. It did hurt, but not the way Alex thought. What hurt was watching a company I'd helped build get handed over to someone who couldn't tell the difference between innovation and disruption. Preston thought he was modernizing SecureTech, but he was actually dismantling it piece by piece. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Alex was using his cop voice, the one that meant he was thinking like a detective. "Shoot. You're not planning anything, are you?" I looked at my son. "Good instincts. Like what?" "I don't know. You just seem... I don't know how to describe it. Like you're waiting for something." "Smart kid. I'm not planning anything illegal if that's what you're asking." "That's not exactly a denial. It's the only answer you're getting." Alex laughed. "Fair enough. Just remember, the girls need their grandpa around." "Roger that." The second week, I started hearing rumors through Tom Rodriguez. Preston was making major changes. 3 more senior engineers had been right-sized out. The the entire legacy systems team was being dissolved. New hires were coming in straight from coding boot camps, kids in their 20s who'd never worked on anything more complex than a mobile app. "The place is falling apart," Tom texted me. "Half the Pentagon liaison team is asking where you went. Preston told them you retired." Retired. Not fired. Retired. Like I'd chosen to walk away from 33 years of work. I also heard through the grapevine that SecureTech was preparing for a major demonstration. New contracts were at stake. Apparently the Pentagon was evaluating cybersecurity proposals for some classified communications upgrade. Big money. The kind of contract that could define the company's next decade. Preston was betting everything on his next-generation platform, the one built on systems I'd designed. On Thursday of the second week, Sarah Walsh called me. Tony's sister, the IP attorney whose business card I'd kept all these years. "Alan, I've been monitoring some patent activity that might interest you." "What kind of activity?" "SecureTech's legal team has been doing deep dives into their IP portfolio. Looks like they're preparing for something major. Due diligence for a big contract, maybe an acquisition." "Interesting. There's something else. They've been specifically researching provisional patent reversions. Very specific searches about automatic triggering clauses." My chest tightened. When did this start? 3 days ago. Someone over there is getting nervous about something. So they knew, or at least suspected. Preston's team wasn't as careless as I'd hoped. "Sarah, hypothetical question. If someone had a provisional patent with a reversion clause, and that clause was about to trigger, what would be the legal standing? Hypothetically? If the contract language is clear and the triggering conditions are met, reversion would be automatic and binding. The USPTO would recognize the change in ownership immediately. Even if the company object? Especially if the company objects. Contract law is contract law. If they signed it, they're bound by it." I thanked Sarah and hung up. So, SecureTech's legal team had figured out the problem. The question was whether they'd tell Preston in time, and whether he'd be smart enough to do something about it. Friday of the second week came and went. The 96-hour deadline was now exactly 1 week away. I spent the weekend with Alex and the girls, teaching Madison how to throw a football and watching Harper practice her reading. Normal grandfather stuff. The kind of moments I'd missed too many of when Alex was growing up. Sunday night, Alex put the girls to bed in my guest room and we sat on the back deck with beers. Commander lay between us, content to have his pack together. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." "Okay. Are you in some kind of trouble? Financial, legal, anything like that?" "No trouble. Because if you need help, you know I'm here, right? The girls and I, we're family. We take care of each other." I looked at my son, 30 years old and raising 2 daughters mostly on his own after his divorce. Working as a patrol officer, pulling overtime whenever he could get it. Good man, but not exactly flush with resources. "I appreciate that, Alex. More than you know. But I'm going to be fine. Promise?" "Promise." Monday morning arrived like the calm before a storm. I knew something was up when Tom Rodriguez called at 7 a.m. Tuesday. "Alan, you need to know what's happening here. Preston's in full panic mode. Legal's been working all weekend and there's some kind of emergency board meeting scheduled for this afternoon." Interesting. And get this, they've postponed the Pentagon demonstration. It was supposed to be Thursday, but now they're saying next week sometime. Technical difficulties, they're calling it. Technical difficulties. That was one way to put it. Any idea what spooked them? No, but I heard Preston screaming at someone from legal yesterday. Something about provisional patents and contract clauses. Mean anything to you? Maybe. Jesus, Alan, what did you do? Nothing yet. Just waiting. By Wednesday, the rumors were flying through. SecureTech like wildfire. Tom kept me updated through encrypted messages. Preston had brought in outside counsel, expensive lawyers from DC who specialized in intellectual property disputes. The entire executive team was in lockdown mode. Nobody was talking to the press, and employees were being told to keep quiet about internal company matters. "They know," Tom texted. "Whatever you're sitting on, they've figured it out." Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. Corporate lawyer, no doubt about it. I opened the door. "Help you? Mr. Mitchell? My name is Catherine Reynolds. I represent SecureTech Dynamics. I'd like to discuss a business matter with you. I'm retired. May I come in?" This concerns intellectual property that may be of significant value to both parties. I let her in. Commander growled softly from his bed, reading the tension in the room. Catherine Reynolds had the polished look of someone who billed $800 an hour. She sat on my couch like she was conducting a negotiation, which I suppose she was. Mr. Mitchell, I'll be direct. Our legal team has identified certain patent filings that may complicate SecureTech's current operations. That sounds like a problem for SecureTech. It's a problem that could be solved to everyone's benefit. We're prepared to offer you a consulting position with the company. Significant compensation, full benefits, equity participation. Sounds generous. What would I be consulting on? Intellectual property integration, specifically helping SecureTech maintain continuity with certain legacy systems. Legacy systems. There was that phrase again. When would this position start? Immediately. Today, if you're interested. I leaned back in my chair. Catherine, can I ask you something? Sure. Does Preston know you're here? Her hesitation told me everything. Mr. Wallace is aware that we're exploring all available options. That's not what I asked. She sighed. No, Mr. Wallace doesn't know I'm here. The board sent me. So the board had figured out what Preston had done and was trying to clean up his mess without telling him. That was interesting. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to pass. Mr. Mitchell, I don't think you understand the situation. This could be worth millions to you. I understand perfectly. You want to hire me back so I can sign over patent rights that will revert to me automatically in 2 days anyway. Catherine's poker face cracked. You know about the reversion clause. I wrote the reversion clause. She was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating how much this conversation was going to cost SecureTech. What do you want? She asked finally. Justice. I'm a lawyer, Mr. Mitchell. Justice isn't a currency I deal in. Money, equity, positions, contracts. Those are things I can work with. Then we don't have anything to discuss. She stood up, snapped her briefcase shut. This doesn't have to be adversarial. There are ways to resolve this that benefit everyone. There are. But Preston burned that bridge when he decided I was obsolete. After she left, I called Sarah Walsh. Sarah, hypothetically, if someone wanted to license patent rights back to a company after reversion, what would fair market value look like? For something essential to a $3.2 billion company's core business? $35 million upfront, plus 12% ongoing royalties would be conservative. And if they refused, then they'd be in violation of federal patent law, injunctions, seizure of assets, criminal penalties for willful infringement. The works. Friday arrived like Judgment Day. At 5 p.m. sharp, the 96-hour window closed. Patent ownership of the core encryption algorithms that powered SecureTech's government contracts officially reverted to me. I didn't celebrate. Just sat on my back deck with Commander and waited for the phone to ring. It took until Monday morning. Mr. Mitchell, this is David Torres, CTO at SecureTech. I think we need to talk. David was one of the good ones. Technical background, understood the systems, treated people with respect. I'd always liked him. What can I do for you, David? I think you know. We need to discuss licensing terms for certain patents. I'm listening. Can you come in today? The board would like to meet with you. I'm retired, remember? You'll have to come here. That afternoon, my living room filled up with SecureTech executives. David Torres, Catherine Reynolds, 2 other board members I recognized, and conspicuously absent, Preston Wallace. Where's Preston? I asked. Mr. Wallace is no longer with the company, one of the board members said. His resignation was accepted this morning, so they'd thrown him under the bus. Couldn't say I was surprised. Gentlemen, lady, I said, let's talk business. The negotiation took 3 hours. They started with threats about legal challenges to the patent reversion. I reminded them that contract law was contract law. They moved to lowball offers. I reminded them that I could simply refuse to license and watch their Pentagon contracts disappear. Finally, we got to serious numbers. $35 million upfront, I said. 12% ongoing royalties. And some conditions. What conditions? David asked. I want the CEO position. Silence. Mr. Mitchell, one of the board members said carefully, you've been out of the company for 3 weeks. I built the systems that make this company valuable. Preston nearly destroyed them in 3 weeks. I can fix them in 3 months. And if we refuse, then you can explain to the Pentagon why your core encryption platform violates federal patent law. More silence. There's one more condition, I said, which is, I want Alex Mitchell hired as head of security operations. My son's a good man, understands technology, has law enforcement experience. David smiled. Done. That evening, Alex came over for dinner. I'd made steaks on the grill, opened a bottle of wine Sarah had been saving for a special occasion. The girls were at their mother's for the week, so it was just the two of us. So, Alex said, cutting into his steak, want to tell me what really happened? I told him everything. The patent filings, the reversion clause, Preston's incompetence, the board's panic, all of it. Dad, that's incredible. You actually beat them. We beat them. You're my new head of security operations. Alex nearly choked on his wine. What? Company needs someone who understands both technology and people. You qualify. I'm a cop, not a tech executive. You're my son. You're smart, honest, and you know how to lead people. I'll teach you the rest. Alex was quiet for a long moment. The girls would love having Grandpa and Daddy working together. That's the idea. Monday morning, I walked back into Secure Tech as CEO. The engineering floor erupted in applause when they saw me. Tom Rodriguez actually started crying. Even some of the younger employees, the ones who'd watched me get fired 3 weeks ago, looked relieved. My first executive decision was calling an all-hands meeting. Some of you know me, some of you don't, I said to the packed auditorium. For those who don't, I'm Alan Mitchell. I built the systems that keep this company running, and I'm here to make sure they keep running for the next 33 years. The applause was thunderous. We're going to make some changes around here. We're going to value experience as much as innovation. We're going to treat people like people, not resources. And we're going to remember that our job isn't just to write code, it's to protect our country. That night, I sat on my back deck with Commander and called Sarah Walsh. Sarah, remember that bourbon you were saving for a special occasion, the 25-year-old Macallan? Tonight's the night. Some people call it revenge. I call it justice, because when you've spent 33 years building something, you don't just walk away quietly. You make sure everyone remembers who really built it. But more importantly, you make sure it gets built right the next time.